So our next panel is going to be enterprise and financial institutions that are looking to acquire blockchain solutions. However, with so many failures over the past few years, they're reluctant because they don't have any knowledge or framework to know a good solution from a bad one. Our next panel will be discussing how the blockchain, turn the page, a maturity model can be used to assess and select blockchain-based financial solutions. So Lori, if you can bring your team up, and Jordan, if you would help me with the chairs.
Good morning. Oh, I'm so glad to be up here with some very important people. And this is the team that is assessing on the blockchain maturity model that GBA has created. So we have Meiyappan and, oh, Eugene, I haven't met you yet. Hi, Eugene. Hey. And we have Frederick DeVoe and Paul Dowding. We have a wonderful group of experts that have trained and created the blockchain maturity model. And myself, Lori Souza, one of the reasons I'm involved in this is that I'm an educator and started educating in crypto and digital assets in 2019. And one thing that I really liked about this movement, which is a movement we're all involved in, is that it brings in a transaction of trust, the ability for it to be built into the transaction. And so being part of the blockchain maturity model allows us as the movement to really bring in the reputable people in this movement in blockchain and weed out the bad actors, because there's a lot of bad actors. And so, and really rely on that transaction of trust. So I wanted to say that, and Gerard said it's so much better up here on the podium. But anyway, we have some great questions. We're talking about how do we introduce this blockchain maturity model to the financial and banking industries. And so with that, I think everybody has lots of things to say. And the first thing I wanted to ask is, when a banking and financial company is seeking a blockchain solution, then why would you explain to them why a blockchain maturity model assessment is important?
What was important?
And go ahead and just do a brief introduction.
I think the audience is sick of me by now. I keep on showing up on the stage. What I'd say was particularly looking at, we know the potential of blockchain. Obviously, Bitcoin's been around since 2009. This is now 14 years. I think blockchain really rose in its awareness in sort of 2015 with the advent of Ethereum, Hyperledger, R3-Corda, digital asset holdings. So the problem is I think people were buying the potential without being able to really assess what was the fundamental abilities of these solutions. And so I would say you've got a lot of variation within the financial services. I think when we did the supplement, we actually identified between our working group 24 different use cases. And I'm sure there's many more, but how do you assess credit cards versus fixed income derivatives? So you've got to be able to separate the different categories. So it's a complex industry with multiple variables, and the BMM acts as a way to gatekeep your suitability and capabilities of your solution. And I think that's really important. And to not put too fine a point on it, there's been a lot of headlines in the last 7 or 8 years about financial service companies using blockchain, but really they're still not beyond the proof of concept stage or very small scale implementations.
If I may, Paul, to add to that quickly, I think we want to look at the big divide that exists between the advances in technology, like the best possible solutions in science that various bright minds around the world are coming up with, and their adoption, their mass adoption among people that use everyday goods and services. And so merchants in the space, like banks, financial companies, they face risks. and they do not want to risk their jobs if they do a wrong move in the area where they're not experts, right? When they're choosing between one financial solution or platform or another, what do they base their decision on if they don't have their own personal experience of 15 years, since Satoshi Nakamoto, or even better from Scott Starnetta's incredible work. So what do? You rely on experts primarily, right, in education, in science, in mass adoption of any technology. So this is why this BMM could be very, very helpful for all parties in this discussion, right? For entrepreneurs and engineers and developers who come up with great products, what do they do with them next? Nobody has marketing budget in the millions to go around the world and offer their solution. You have financial regulators that want to regulate. They want to know what are the guidelines that they are to apply when evaluating something their members bring. And of course, the user, right? Am I installing this wallet? Is my money going to be gone or not, right? So in many ways, for a merchant to have a BMM stamp of assessment, let's say, or having passed an assessment, is a major, major risk reduction and helps adoption of technology. Thank you.
And if I can add to that, sometimes it's easy to fall in the trap of just looking at the technology and being able to have the BMM that has 11 elements that are not necessarily directly related to the technology. So looking at the governance, looking at the infrastructure sustainability or the resilience, it allows also by the institutions to make sure that the technology is going to be integrated within their existing institution and not just looking at technology, but how it's going to impact the rest of the institution.
Hi. There are multiple number of answers for this. Why? Okay. So that's why all are speaking on that. Vanakkam. Ellarum nalla irukingala? Anyone understood? No, right? So that's the purpose of BMM. So blockchain is little bit of in an understandable stage or status. So when you want to understand, if you could understand commonly a simple language, then automatically it can be understood by everyone. Simple and smart is very important. So that is the whole interest of BMM, blockchain maturity model, which can educate the user, the acquirer, and also any kind of investor. So that is the purpose of the building this particular blockchain maturity model, to bring in a common language across the whole industries. It's not only for financial industries, it's for any industry, basically. And further down, to ensure the domain expertise, we have the supplements. So this is one of the thought process. Thank you. And the initial thing was nothing but, it was Tamil language, and it is hello or hi, vanakkam, that's it. Over.
Yeah, that's a very important point too. And probably along with the next question is, what are some of the factors that are preventing large-scale adoption of blockchain in the financial services industry?
Okay, I can maybe start with that one. Lack of true scalability at the moment is probably one reason up there. If we can imagine, for example, a solution that requires 100 million users to log in simultaneously, there are 2 blockchains in the world that I'm aware of that will not crash immediately. And that's a brand new kid on the block, SUI, and our favorite Everscale, which both are multi-thread, multi-shard architecture. So one of the threats is that when you scale up, is your infrastructure going to be there to support? And I'm sure the gentleman will add many more.
Well, there's quite a few. Fundamentally, it's performance, functionality, and ease of adoption, which is really held up. And part of my career was to represent a New York Stock Exchange floor broker, where we were selling out, direct market access to high-frequency traders and algorithmic execution. So you're dealing with transactions that are coming in at the millisecond level. So that needed to be our litmus test for what we were going to be accommodating. So in certain cases, you need that level of capacity throughput, as well as dealing with 9 million trades a day on the New York Stock Exchange. So if you're really going to try and digitize that market, you've got to be able to handle that scale and scope, which gets to performance. In terms of functionality, and this is shocking one for us, where we included double entry accounting within and transacting periods. So if you think about it, although the legacy world is old technology, it does consider the future. And although blockchain is new technology, it only considers the past because it's an immutable record from today backwards, but that's it. So if you can't record future dated payable receivables, you have no view into the risk, accruals, or projections that you need to record in your ledgers as of today. So that's part of what we looked at in our solution. So the functionality is limited to sort of fully paid bilateral transfers, which is what a Bitcoin transfer is. So without that functionality, and in its good forms and sometimes in its less than good forms, leverage and obligations are a big factor in all the financial transactions. They're all future dated payable receivables. So if you're not recording them, you're lacking that functionality. And then ease of adoption is really around that these digital networks tend to be walled gardens. They still need to interoperate with legacy infrastructure because you're not going to transform a market in a day. So that's the legacy world and why it struggled, I believe.
And they must interact with each other, which is another huge problem, right? Very few do with each other.
I would also take a look at, again, like governance, right? I mean, since we are talking about a network at that point, we have multiple nodes with multiple institutions that now not only, want to transact with one another, but on a similar platform and everything. And so, again, having things like a BMM that is going to have like an element specifically looking at how this is governed is a good way to making sure that we're not forgetting about it. Yeah.
You have to repeat the question.
Okay, so what might be some obstacles in the financial sector implementing blockchain solutions?
Obstacles for implementing blockchain solution, of course, everyone has to learn about the blockchain maturity model. Okay, so that's a very important role, and wherein each of the banking solution is now driven by one segment of their own process. Okay, so the process is separate and the product is separate. When it comes for the blockchain maturity model, so it tries to educate everyone with the process and product. So that is the whole concept of blockchain maturity model, which is going to really bridge that particular gap. Over.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember the slides that Gerard had on the screen here earlier, but it did share the elements that we have in the blockchain maturity model, and there are 11 elements that we assess in. And so with that, all of the elements are important, that's why they're included. But with the banking and financial services, of course, we need an additional supplement. Maybe we can discuss that right now on what are some of the additional items we need to look at in an assessment when assessing a solution, a blockchain solution for the financial industry.
Well, maybe I'll start on the backbone side. Sort of for financial industry, there are several critical parameters that must be addressed by any platform, any solution, any app. Again, scalability and ability to process a massive amount of transaction has been talked about before. Network finality, or in finance terms, settlement time, is also very critical, right? If it takes longer than a second, maybe 2 seconds, it's not acceptable in the financial industry unless you're dealing with like muni bond issuance. But on a high frequency, high volume trades, they're just not acceptable. There's many other technical level issues that have to be looked at, like network resilience, and what happens if it has happened in the past, a particular like ISP provider has been taken out of service, right? You like a certain area geographic loses connection. Do you have enough nodes? Do you have enough validators outside of that affected area to continue like uninterrupted supply of support, etc.? Gentlemen.
With the BM supplement of banking, we have around 23 support functions, so which are going to be playing the role of the elements, and that particular criticality would depend upon the use case also. So when it's going to be a use case driven blockchain application, then it will be driven with respect to that particular applicable maybe requirements. Okay, so there is a very good matrix available in your in the supplement. It's available on the GBA website, and you can always download and understand more. I'll leave it to Paul for further.
Yeah, so when we came to the banking working group to look at this, we sort of said, what are the use cases we wanted to identify? And then what would be the requirements against each of those use cases, because they all have sort of unique. But we found some of the requirements kept on repeating themselves. So in the end, we pulled up a matrix to say use cases versus requirements. So we identify 23 use cases, and we I'm going to get this wrong. No, 24 use cases and 23 requirements. Now, having gone through my assessment, I wished I'd kept it down to about 5.
In fact, I would like to say one thing. He wrote his own fate. When we came to the assessment, then only understood. Oh, right. So we have written something more where it can be questioned.
What was I thinking? No, so here is the matrix, and I brought it because although Eugene challenged us to remember 12 words yesterday for our passphrase, I can barely remember the 11 elements sometimes, so I've got them here for my... But just to understand, we looked at, institutional banking, private banking, community banking, micro-lending, credit cards, debit and prepaid cards, central banks, CBDC, capital markets, structured products, exchange-traded derivatives. So there's a lot of different elements. And part of it is when we said you had a requirement, the requirement, when we talked about scalability or high capacity, high capacity wasn't applicable to some of the use cases. So you wouldn't get assessed against that requirement in your supplement. Scalability was not about how big are you, it's how big do you need to be for your use case, and does the solution meet that requirement? So that's where we felt like the process got to a more meaningful stage. And again, to reiterate Gerard's point earlier, the goal here is not pass-fail. The goal is to work with the solution saying, if this is the field you're entering, then you need to consider these requirements and make sure you do it. And we, at the level 1 assessment, particularly at the idea stage or the documented stage or even proof of concept, getting this kind of feedback at the point where you can potentially redesign or adjust your process is, invaluable. So that's, I'd make that point.
Perfect.
I just wanted to see how many here are members of the GBA, by show of hands, almost everybody. So one of the opportunities everybody gets with this blockchain maturity model is to go out to the people that you're talking to who are considering blockchain as a solution and asking them when they're deciding, has their company been rated or with the blockchain maturity model yet? And so that really brings in the maturity that they're looking for when selecting a solution. So everybody in the GBA gets that opportunity to share this information.
May I ask a quick question in the educational field then? What are your thoughts about, promoting BMM and BMM-like services among broader audience?
Another reason I'm with this team, and this is the from the Standards and Certifications Working Group of where we did a lot of the work for the BMM. So with education, I have found that we're out there fighting the resistance. And so we can use very simple terms, which I tend to use, and there's still a lot of resistance, a lot of the naysay, because we're in a paradigm shift. I was sharing this earlier. And a lot of people like things the way they were. And to change into something new or change into a new way of doing things, we went through the same thing with the advent of the computer, with the advent of the credit card, right? So really bringing it to very simple terms is what we need to do. And, one of the things I share in teaching is, when the computer first came out, or when you got your first computer or a new computer, did you ask, well, how does this work when I plug it in? How does the electricity power up my computer? Nobody asks that. They just plug it in because they trust that the electricity is going to reach the computer. So the same thing with blockchain. We do get very detailed down into the technology because you're innovators and technologists, and so that's your language. And so now the education is to keep it in very simple terms, and even in that language, there's a lot of resistance. So I think really, somebody touched on it yesterday on stage saying, let's keep it simple when we're explaining. This is transparent, it's an efficient, all the
Instead of-
characteristics of blockchain.
Instead of DeFi, you can call it DCEN. That was a good explanation. So
Yes, thank you.
terminologies are very, very important. So if you start speaking in a very different clinical terminology, then a patient may not understand. Okay, so
Yeah.
we need to be very careful in demonstrating that and ensuring that it is emphasized. And of course, taking to the levels. Okay, so there are different levels. There are users, investors, maybe organizations who are trying to explore on this. Everyone are aiming to reach some place, right? So, but everyone need not have to understand the whole technology. If everyone wants to need to understand the whole technology, then they will be confused. So it should be in such a pattern that which is required, that has to be understood. That is why we need to have it simple and smart.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, if I may add, oh,
Oh, we do have a question. Sure.
Yeah, so Lori, brilliant panel, thank you. Robert Levin. So I have a question about the outreach. Have you written a marketing strategy to reach out to the top 100 college campus blockchain societies and start an ISO committee to apply for a global standard like ISO 9000, which is famous in hotels? Could you explain your marketing strategy to incentivize our members to participate in the marketing and sales pipeline?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think Gerard does a great job of making sure it's loud and clear on the website. And so then it's really all up to all of us to really look at the information that's on there and take it out.
but also some steps are being taken, I must say.
Oh,
For
wonderful,
example,
thank you.
For example, like what Dina was describing earlier, this Internet Governance Forum, right? What's a better way for a very broad population to get exposure to those issues than from the words of guys on the top, right? They understand. There's a lot of trust, I must say, in like UN as an international organization and some of its specific companies and organizations inside. There's a lot of trust, and to capitalize on that trust, I think benefits the humanity enormously. So what, Gerard, you're doing is exactly right, and thank you, Dina.
Yes, thank you.
I would just say we're also at the very early stages where we've done 2 of these level 1 assessments. So part of that process is to validate the team that will be effectively going out into the world as assessors, and also to validate the process. But we've, and I think in terms of the collective work sort of shepherded by Gerard, has included all the proper documentation to understand the process, to track it, to record it, but also the associated training materials. And that's taken a huge amount of effort, particularly on Gerard and the team, video recording each of the detailed documents and then having a quiz and test afterwards. And I set myself some difficult quiz questions, I think. So, when I went to the training, I was thinking, what was I thinking? But again, that's part. I think once this starts rolling out, then we'll have a greater audience to put, to sell it to. But certainly, I think the coordination with the UN is going to be a fabulous, publicity.
And that's for the software education, but I think also the group is, one way is like trying to start thinking the BMM as like security, right, by design and not just afterthought. And so there is a lot of thing that we're learning as doing the assessment of like, okay, are there like base documents or little checklists or little templates? Or there is a lot of things that actually, even when we start saying, okay, I want to make a blockchain-based solution, where we can start by asking some of these questions because they're gonna show up, right? Okay, what is the governance? How am I thinking of the sustainability? All these things like that. We can start answering them as we are ideating basically the solution. And so then it's already done. It's like by design, we're already there. And so creating some of these starter kits, maybe document and stuff, could probably think that we may think of doing as well.
Coming to your second question of members, what is that we are going to do with the members? So for members, already we have done a lot. Just the opportunity is there in the website. You need to pitch in if you have not pitched in so far. Okay, so what are the opportunities? First opportunity would be you can become a consultant for the BMM to other organizations who are going to implement. Second one, assessor. Third one, again, assessor. In assessor, you have one more designation called as lead assessor. Other one is BAPs, so business assessment partners. So like iBlockchain of Sari. So if you are having a good organization who would like to partner, then of course you can always, you are welcome in that. So by which you, all the members are getting the benefits from individual member to the organization member. Over.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oh, we have some more questions too. So let's start in the back there. Hi.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Lohman. I'm a GDA member. The last question was about marketing. This question is about pricing. What would the cost be to go through? Yes, this question's about pricing. What is the cost to go through the blockchain maturity model assessment process? Is it a fixed cost, or is it based on the complexity of the business at hand?
Our estimation centers at the back. Yeah.
Hi, I'll walk to the front.
Gerard Cresson.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Well, look, this is a tough question because it's a brand new model, and quite frankly, we're still figuring it out. So I'll tell you where we are right now. Do I need to get on stage, or can I speak from here? Okay, no, it's a camera issue. Yeah, so let me tell you what we've done so far. The real cost is just labor, right? So if you're going to get four people to spend four people like this to spend some time, you got to pay them, right? So, but we're doing everything we can to keep costs down. So the very first step in the process is to do a self-assessment. Download the model for free, right? And essentially put together in fact, we can give you a template, or you can just create a little Excel spreadsheet and just do a compliance matrix and say, okay, well, the model says this, how am I doing? To keep your costs low, I would essentially, instead of getting a whole team, go to the website, grab a consultant, say, hey, would you help me? Would you give me a couple hours to kind of walk through this? I think I got it right, but would you just help me? We do not want people to spend a lot of money on this, right? And so what we've done on some of the early assessments is folks have volunteered their time because we have an incentive, right, in order to get more adoption. But right now, the only cost that we are planning or anticipating is the time you would need. Now, in Paul's case, because he was very well prepared, he'd done the self-assessment, right? But even with that, it took us about 16 hours, right? So I would say the very first step would be do a self-assessment. It costs you nothing. And then, reach out to one of these folks. We're gonna do listings by industry, right? But you might want to have an assessor that's in your geographic area or location, whatever. Walk through this and say, hey, here's where I think I am, right? Let them tell you how close you are, and then we'll put a team together. The assessment is going to be somewhere between 2 days and 4 or 5 days, depending on how prepared you are, because there's a series of things that have to happen. There's an initial documentation review, there's a conference where we go back and forth, we have to draft the findings, we then review the findings back with the solution provider, we work out any details. So it is a collaborative thing, and you can put your own internal people on the assessment team to keep the cost down. But there's a percentage, I think you can't have more than 1/3 of the team be from the internal company, because we need to maintain the objectivity. But couple days labor of several people is basically what the cost is.
But isn't it a potential revenue source for the GDA?
It is. There's two things that go on, and they relate with each other, right? So if the demand is high and the resources are limited, the price goes up, right? Right now, the demand is essentially just bubbling up. Right, so if you want to get an assessment, get it now when the demand is low, because your costs will be lower, right? The price will go up essentially as it becomes more.
Can I just add one point, just to Gerard, just to reassure you? Yeah, it did help that I'd been part of the process for my own assessment, but the 16 hours also was the 11 elements and the 23 financial services requirements. So the actual BMM as an 11 assessment was probably the first 5 or 6 hours, 4 or 5 hours.
But just the member of the audience and the GBA member raised a very important question, which you recall, we discussed on numerous occasions. How do you automate, right? How do you involve artificial intelligence in the process instead of going and looking for experts in 1,000 different domain areas? And how do you make the system flexible enough that it's self-sustaining? Let me assure you, the demand you've identified is not going anywhere. It's only going to grow. So I think we have to prepare for massive interest. Thank you.
Yeah, that is down the road. We have talked, eventually we'd like this process to become a DAO, right? But Eugene's trying to have that be tomorrow. I'm saying, hold off, we got to slow down a little bit, right? So whoa, Eugene. But yeah, we do want it eventually to become, so the pricing model, like I said, is evolving. But right now, if you do it, it's essentially just for the labor hours, yeah.
And there was some more questions.
One question.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for this. Something that Gerard said in his presentation I thought was really important, which is that usually these assessment things are, not legitimate. Like if you take the mobile phone industry, there was a data privacy assessment thing that everybody in the industry got aboard, but it was really just a way to avoid people looking at data privacy. And now we have the SIM swap cases, right? And that's what makes this so important, is that it's being put together by it's not like a Microsoft certification. It's like a independent certification. And it's extremely useful and extremely good for the industry, I think.
One point, since we understood the selection of certifications, we are not even using the word certification. So that is one of the important things which we are trying to do. What we are trying to do, we are trying to improve the application which is being talked as a blockchain solution to recognize to the external world. Okay, so that is the whole interest what we are trying to do. And in fact, this is an opportunity which has to be taken. So if you are holding an application, please ensure to proceed further from the self-assessment.
But also certification assumes some kind of liability on the part of the certifier, while assessment is much more of an opinion, right?
Of course.
And one of the things that a word we're using is a rating. So has the blockchain provider you're looking into selecting, have they been rated with the GBA? And so what's their level of rating? There's 5 levels of rating that a blockchain solution provider has the opportunity to go through 5 different levels of an assessment. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Yes. I was just going to say quickly on the question, obviously, if you're a solution provider, this is obviously a good way for you to get a validation. And if you've got a solution buyer that may be interested in sponsoring your assessment, that's another alternative. But the other point to make for the GBA members, and certainly those of you who are in the sort of consultative or service-driven roles, the point of us, the generation of the training, was also that you can be trained to be a consultant. So you can advise clients on assessments, or you can be trained to be an assessor. And so therefore it's an opportunity for you to sort of generate your own business as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello. It's amazing what you all are doing. First of all, I've been going to these conferences since maybe my first meetup was like 2011, so Ethereum didn't exist yet. And what I wanted to say is it's wonderful that you're letting the audience interact with you all. So it's fantastic. But one of the things I'd like to contribute, if it hasn't considered, because I haven't gotten through all your documentation, I'll read all of it, including the other gentleman's book that he presented yesterday. But do you have a reassessment process for each of the supplements? And if you don't, just consider that. And then also for each one of the assets, because what I found over the years is that, when you assess me today, I may make adjustments based on my environment, based on the competition, based on the requirements of the consumers and those that use the assets that we create, right? And so what happens is you assess me today, but 3 years from now, I've evolved and I've transformed. So you have to revisit that. And so that certification, you have to revisit it from time to time. And then that also applies to the individuals that'll be working on behalf of the GBA and spreading the good news so we can proliferate as, a blockchain community.
Great point.
I rest.
Continuous process. Yeah, I fully agree.
In fact, for your kind of information, there are 3 documents. One is the BMM requirement, other one is the BMM overview document, then comes the BMM assessment requirement. As ma'am said, estimation, of course, over a period, seeing the demand, we will be releasing the estimation process also. So everything is process driven. Of course, few informations on the reassessment or the revision of the standard, that everything is covered on the assessment and overview documents. So if you go further down and take down the information from the blockchain, that is from the GBA website, you will get more information which will really answer plenty of questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and what's built into the assessment is that a company could go through and pass a level 1 assessment, and then when they're ready to move on to the next level, there's a level 2 assessment. So, yes.
Ann Werner, I'm the General Counsel of Algorand. Could someone speak a little bit about the technical side of things? I was kind of surprised to hear a statement, I think it was you, Eugene, that said that there are only 2 that can have the scalability. Algorand does 6,000 transactions per second. Time to finality is 3.6 seconds. So I think, there are some developers or some thinkers
Sure.
Who have gone out to solve the blockchain trilemma, which is simultaneously to be scalable, secure, and decentralized. And I know Algorand has solved that, so I was just kind of surprised by those statements.
I understand. The ongoing world record is about 55,000 SEPs. It's not TPS even, it's SEPs. There's only 2 networks in the world that kind of work close to that. 6,000 is a major achievement. Congratulations. That's probably about the same as Visa and MasterCard. So those are incredible technical advances. You need very special, of course, speed connections. You have very special nodes written in Rust language only at the moment. There's a whole bunch of technical stuff you can work with. The network finality under 2 seconds is achievable today. It has been demonstrated as well. And when it's sub-second, it's perfect for financial world. So technically speaking, it's happening. But again, proven speed record over open network, not in your lab, is far and rare and in between. If you've got the data to support, talk to me, please. We'll publicize. Thank you.
And then on that, I don't know, Jordan, did you have a slide with the 11 elements that we assess on? Just so you can see all the other elements that we do consider.
And also there's a third
in addition
element.
to the scalability.
A third element to network finality and latency is cost, right? How much is your transaction cost?
The three things are security, scalability, and decentralization. That's the blockchain trilemma. And we've actually added a 4th, which is environmental.
And cost.
And we're carbon neutral.
Yeah, it cannot be prohibitively expensive to run nodes, right?
Yeah.
So cost is important.
And what's nice is this is a framework so that companies can actually look and check the boxes on each element and see where they are. So it's all of it's on the website, which is very nice. And I think the 11 elements are on there. There we go. There they all are.
If you go through
So,
the
yeah.
requirement, it will be very good.
And this is why Paul was very well prepared in his assessment, and it still took 16 hours. So,
I'd say 4 or 5 for these ones.
yeah. So these are all of the elements. You have access to what we're looking at in each category, and there's, again, 5 levels
Now,
for.
if you could go into the blockchain maturity model, can you press the model? Resources? Documents?
Documents, there they are. See, it's all there.
Press down. BM requirements. Sorry, I thought it's touchscreen.
So, yeah, there's a lot of information on the
If you open
website.
that- Can you open that?
I was just going to say that the key thing about the assessments as well is it's not there's a couple of aspects to this. We had to step back and say, does this work for public as well as private permissioned, and all the different types and protocols that are out there. So rather, and again, we've emphasized, this is not pass-fail. This is suitability in terms of as a blockchain, as a solution. And when you sort of dive into sort of individual criteria, you find you're trying to argue a point which is not really relevant to the assessment. You want to say, is this blockchain against those elements mature?
Yeah, if you see the level 4 requirement of production, you can see some even level 3 also. So level 3, no single person or entity may have administrative control of the hardware for more than 50%. So this is where the specification starts, okay? So unfortunately, I'm not remembering because I'm a highly confidential person, okay? Cannot remember all those things. So everything is there, and it will be changed more also. So there will be a very good amendment happening around, and already the person is behind me. So Eugene already has a huge list of requirements which has to be incorporated because he is directly from the product.
We very much appreciate what GBA has started doing. I think Gerard and the team identified a true market need, an interest of people of getting something from this organization, and that's wonderful. But we're thinking ahead in terms of when this interest will be massive. This wonderful panel of experts, no matter how little they sleep, they still have physical limitations as to what can be done. Please don't argue with that, Paul. But we're thinking ahead and what can be done in the future. The earlier we start, the earlier we get there. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And feedback, of course, you all the GB members who are here have to give their feedbacks on this model, okay? Because then only it can be improved. Otherwise, without the feedback, without the suggestions, nothing can be marching forward. So we always request your support.
Can I throw one thing in real quick? Jordan, if you can go back to the documents webpage, at the bottom of that webpage is a document feedback form. So I know a lot of you coming out of this thing they're going to go and read the documents. If you have any thoughts, ideas about how we can make it better, we would love to hear from you. And we have a process for doing that. So if you go to the gbaglobal.org page, under resources, you'll find the blockchain maturity model. The documents link that you saw at the bottom there, you can upload a document, you can provide your comments. All of that stuff goes to our team. They sort through everything, and then we review that regularly. So we would very much, it's right there at the bottom of the page. So if you think we're, not on the right track or whatever, absolutely we want to hear from you. And if you've got solutions that you think the world ought to know about, please let us know, because when we rate an organization, the next thing we want to do is tell everybody in the world about that they had passed that rating, because it's good for us too. So we have a whole marketing communications team to do that.
Can I just add something as well, just to sort of say, within the GBA as members, I'd encourage you to join these working groups, and don't be intimidated by the. Yes, I'm in the financial services, so I've been audited. I have to be compliant, but I'm not an assessor expert. So I joined this team obviously to add some perspective on blockchain technology, but I was learning about how assessments are done and the standards and the approach. I joined the voting working group because although I may be an active voter, I know very little about elections, but it was a way for me to inform myself about that use case. So again, and we've had people in the groups who participate to listen and learn, and that's fine, there's training. So again, the participation is not about, hey, I've got something to bring to the table. It's you can learn, and you'll be amazed at what you can contribute just as a generalist. And again, that's a way to participate in making this process better.
You have a question?
Yes, so Charlton Woodyard, CEO of Aviated Ventures, a social impact ecosystem, proud GBADC member. My question is more so about the BMM being a platform, as you just spoke about, Gerard, for companies that pass the BMM certification to work specifically with companies that are looking for such solutions that have such credibility. So is there an ecosystem of companies, both a part of the GBA and externally, that are financially prepared to support these companies after their investment in creating these solutions and in investing in being vetted by the BMM? Is there a jet stream to kind of push these companies into it? Gerard just alluded to it, but have you organized such agreements or?
Sure, let me say one thing, then I want to turn it over to Dino. And by the way, this guy right here, if you don't know Charlton, get to know him. He's a phenomenal human being. Yeah. And we got to be really fast because I'm sure we're over time. The government of, one of the national government of Mexico election body is about to put an RFP in June. My understanding is that they're going to put a BMM requirement out for their election, right? Because they want to do a blockchain, they want technology, blockchain-based technology, but they want it to have been BMM rated.
That would be an incredible testament. Incredible.
Yeah. Now, we have talked to people in government, at the GSA, and a number of other people. We're telling them, please do not put a BMM rating requirement in the solicitation in terms of achieving a particular level, but we would encourage you to use it as a framework for the RFP, right? We are still evolving, and we don't want to mess up that government acquisition process, but this is a very informative, educational. If you say, hey, you have to have been rated and submit your results along with the proposal, I think that's fine, right? But don't say you have to hit level 1, 2, 3, because they're going to do stuff like saying, well, you have to be level 5. Right, without knowing anything about the model and imposing all of these ridiculous requirements on something. So we're trying to take this slow. Eugene is exactly right. When this thing catches, it's going to catch fast. We're actually right now trying to make sure that we have the training materials in place, that we have trained, competent people, that we have business relationships around the world. We're working with Perkins Coie to help protect the intellectual property. This is not something we want to rush. It is desperately needed. We have to make sure that we build it strong. Because if we go fast and we haven't built the foundation, this thing will collapse and it'll be the end for all of us. So with that, now, Eugene, Dino, you wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, Gerard. Just to add a comment that complements what Gerard just said, but also that was subtly introduced by Eugene. There is a very important distinction in terms of roles. When we're talking about assessment, we fundamentally, during the assessment, it kind of like a compliance assessment. You have a set of requirements and you check whether the condition, the evidence that exists in the solution being assessed meets those expected requirements. However, there is another profile. There are two profiles. There are the assessors and there are the advisors. So going back to what Eugene was saying, there is what is called in the world of auditing a risk-based audit as compared to a compliance-based audit. So the advisor is actually a profile that can advise an organization to predetermine whether there are any risks that may prevent their solution or their organizational process to meet those requirements. So this is a system that needs fundamentally at least two sets of expertise. Those who are expert in assessing and those who are expert in advising in whether there are risks and if there are, how to mitigate those risks. So I think this is an important distinction because it requires two different type of individual with two different type of expertise and preparation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to finish my thing. Yeah.
We're going to go.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.